Hello all, and welcome to Runway 25. So, instead of my usual lore videos, I just thought I'd do a quick little follow-up video to the podcast I was on the other day, the Dingecast. Really fun experience. First time I had ever been on a podcast. It showed. Just like my social awkwardness superpower. Anyway, and I'm sure you'll see a lot of that in this video. Here you go. What I wanted to do was clarify some points I wanted to make in that podcast that I just got too flustered and mind fogged to get out properly. First time I had been on a podcast, wasn't quite sure how it would go, and my brain was just a flurry of bees. So much going on in there, I just could not verbalize my thoughts properly. But here we are. Hopefully I'll do that here. So one of the thoughts I wanted to clarify is where the name of that episode came from. Connections. Everything in our storytelling, at least, is based off of something. Is based off of some historical precedent or some story before it that likely is based off of something in history. I mean, case in point is where I totally fumbled. It was talking about Ace Combat. In Ace Combat 5, the game I just totally fumbled showing off, you have two important missions in the game. One where it's totally based off the Battle of Midway, where if you notice in the game, ever since the Yuktobanians attack you at your harbor, and I'll get to that in a minute, you're on the back foot. You're playing the defensive against the Yuktobanians throughout Ace Combat 5. But after you sink the Sinfaxi during the mission Frontline, where you're defending Sand Island, a real island in the Midway Atoll in our universe, when you sink the Sinfaxi, that's when the war turns in favor of your side, the Oseans, and you stop playing the defensive and start playing the offensive. In the real world, the US Navy tricked the Japanese Navy into attacking that same island that appears in Ace Combat 5 in our universe, and that was called the Battle of Midway, and that's when the battle turned, or at least the war turned, in the United States' favor against Japan. The United States had been playing defensive since the bombing of Pearl Harbor, and it was only at the Battle of Midway that the war turned in favor of the US, and the Japanese were on the defensive, and the United States was on the offensive. And what I failed to clarify is how they just use that to tell their own story. It's not World War II. Ace Combat 5's war has basically nothing to do with World War II, but it is based off of it to some extent for a storytelling motif or for storytelling purposes. They just like in Star Wars, how in my favorite era, the prequel eras, oh my god, such an unpopular opinion, especially if you're an uneducated neckbeard. Not talking about any commentators on the internet in particular, but in the prequel era of Star Wars, one of the big themes or big parts of the story isn't just Anakin's fall from Jedi to Sith, from Anakin to Vader. It's also simultaneously about how the Galactic Republic transitioned to the Galactic Empire the same way the Roman Republic transition to the Roman Empire. A lot of people forget that there is a distinction. When Rome voted itself out of democracy, it became the Roman Empire. The same way when the Galactic Republic voted Supreme Chancellor Palpatine, and we'll get to that in a second, to be emperor, that's what happened. The same thing in Rome. And same thing in Germany. That's why they chose the title Supreme Chancellor. That was Hitler's title, right? Oh my god, here's my itchy nose again. Oh my god, itch. That's what got me, man. Allergies here, dude, in the Midwest, not fun. Anyway, so I wanted to, clarify that thought. Another thought that I wanted to clarify. Oh, and one thing I wanted to get to that I didn't get to also, for a really good example of stories being based on history, or at least sort of. In 1951, there's a story that comes from 1951 called the Flatwoods Monster story, or at least the story of the Flatwoods Monster. which inspired many a sci-fi creature. If you've played the Nintendo 64 Legend of Zelda games, I'm not really a big Legend of Zelda high fantasy fan, more of a sci-fi guy, obviously. No offense. Dude, that high fantasy stuff is everywhere where I am, and I absolutely love seeing it. It's just not my bread and butter. So I will sound a bit ignorant talking about Legend of Zelda here. But in one of the games, I forget which one, you have these like floating alien creatures with little claw hands, and they look like they're wearing pleated skirts that look awfully similar to something another sci-fi creature wears, and I'll get to that in a second. But the reason I bring up the Legend of Zelda ones is those are the most accurate depictions of this Flatwoods monster. So the story goes, in 1951, this teacher and her students saw what looked like a meteor in great detail. I mean, if I believed in these UFO stories, I would believe that this is amazingly detailed. So if you're telling a sci-fi story, I mean, I can see why so many people went for this. This teacher and her students describe seeing this meteor. It lands in Flatwoods, West Virginia. This creature comes out of what appears to be a spaceship. So yeah, if a spaceship was landing on Earth, it would look like a meteor, which is pretty cool. And this creature comes out. It looks just like those creatures from Legend of Zelda. And I'm not quite sure. I have to look back into it again. But there's one point in the story where they basically interact with it or get its attention somehow. And it starts making this whirring and churring sound, like it's mixing something inside it, which is where it gets really interesting because, yeah, okay, that's an odd detail, especially in combination with the fact that it started to emit this gas, allegedly, that burned their lungs and made the teacher and students run off. And when they went to the doctor, they're like, yeah, you got mustard gas poisoning, allegedly is how the story goes. And yeah, if there was a creature mixing chemicals or a machine mixing chemicals, I can imagine it sounded like a blender or something, and then yeah, that would come out. So I mean, that sounds super realistic. And then I think, if I remember correctly, they even saw it blast off like a actual like rocket. So yeah, it sounds super realistic. That's why I think a lot of sci-fi people went for it. In fact, one of the most iconic sci-fi creatures of all time is partly based off of the Flatwoods Monster. And my favorite sci-fi villainous species, I don't know, my favorite sci-fi antagonist species, I don't know what the word would be of all time, the Daleks. Yes, the bottom half is inspired by the Flatwoods Monster. So, my point is, everything or most things are inspired by something that came before. And another point I wanted to make, voice crack there. Another point I wanted to make was stories exist to communicate information and to pass down moral lessons and important, I mean, even more than that, just important lessons in general. And they're also a way of preserving our history. Clearly, with Star Wars, we've preserved the fall of the Roman Republic and the rise of the Roman Empire by reflecting it with the fall of the Galactic Republic and the rise of the Galactic Empire. So, you know, that's a way of us preserving that story. And also, in doing so, especially in Star Wars, communicating the dangers of voting yourself out of democracy, out of bigotry, ignorance, hate, and fear, which are all based off of each other. You know, most anger is built off of fear, which is built off of ignorance. So, I mean, that's a big moral lesson in Star Wars. I mean, Yoda says it, even, you know, fear leads to anger, anger leads to hate, and then, you know, that leads to suffering, right? So, movies like Star Wars pass down not just history, but moral lessons as well. And you can see I covered this in about 10 minutes, where I absolutely failed to cover that in, like, what, an hour and a half on a podcast. I am absolutely ashamed of my socially awkwardiness. So that's all. That's all I wanted to cover. So, anyway, some quick housekeeping, I guess, at the end of the video, just because I'm here and I got you here. I do have a video coming out that I am working on. If you've heard what sounds like an air conditioner or a fan running, that is my computer doing a render. Oh, I think it's actually finished. Of a plane for the video I'm working on. I did get, or I am working on a video that is highly requested on the, what is it, the R201, I believe. Whatever the one that looks like something Burt Rutan would make with like the two cockpits from Ace Combat 3. I'm working on that, I promise. But yeah, I should have a video out on the 6th. It will be a remake of one of my first videos on the channel, one of my older videos. I know I've remade a couple videos lately, mainly because there actually wasn't a lot to do with, there's not a lot of good Sonic vehicle lore, so I had to work with what I got. That, and when I make my videos, I like to make them like editions of books. So first edition, second edition, third edition, so on and so on. And when I put my first video out, that's usually like a call where I'm like, yo, over here, here's the research I've gathered. Does anyone have any more? Does anyone have any corrections to make? I want to make the real video. So this is like, hey, you know, help me out, basically, is when my first videos on a subject come out. So usually expect me to make a follow-up video or correction video on most subjects that I cover. As you can see, podcast too. So just thought I'd do some housekeeping there. But I guess, you know, my voice is cracking a little bit. I'm tired. I guess until next time, guys. I don't know what else to cover, but I'll see you, I guess, in my June 6th video that'll be coming out. So see you then.